Okay, back in the bunker this week for the lectures on trade and maybe the inventions. We'll see if I get to it today. Um, we'll see if that's in the cards, recording more lectures. Okay, so trade. Um, going to go through the theory about trade, and then we'll look at kind of how it played out on the ground. In the well, this actually stretches more into the 21st century rather than the 20th century. Okay, and so the theory is the standard economic theory is that trade spurs growth, and this is not just a theory, but you could look at the historical evidence. You could see kind of time and time again, when a country opens up for trade, it becomes wealthier. And you want to think even through antiquity, like your historic centers of wealth are typically trading centers: Rome, Venice, Istanbul, or Constantinople back in the day. Um, and the important thing to think about is there's one way of viewing trade, which is that it's a zero-sum game. And this is the mercantilist view, that, hey, if I'm exporting to you, that's only good for me. But that's not really how trade works. Trade is not a zero-sum game. We can both be better off from the trade, okay? And really where this gains come from is this concept called comparative advantage. And essentially, this idea is, okay, even if I'm better at everything, even if my country or me as a person am better at everything, producing all the goods, I can still gain from trade. Essentially, what it is trade allows specialization. It allows for me to specialize in one thing, specialize in the thing that I'm relatively the best at, and then trade for all the other things. Okay, so the example I always use is LeBron James. Okay, so LeBron James is great at many things. He's a great coach for the Lakers. He's a great GM for the Lakers, and he's a great player for the Lakers. But he's also good at other things. You'd imagine, he would, he'd be good at all sorts of things that he would put his mind to. He's probably would be like a great tutor for his kids, and maybe he tutors his kids. I don't know. I don't know the man personally. Although I could tell some stories about Maverick Carter, his manager, which I have met on a number of occasions. But anyways, enough name dropping. Um, so so LeBron, he's obviously excellent at all these facets, what he does for the Lakers. Okay. But he probably doesn't tutor his kids because it's better for him to specialize in production in the market, production, doing all the associated things around being the greatest basketball player on earth, and then pay someone else to, tutor or maybe do the gardening or do the shopping, whatever. It would be inefficient for him to do these things, waste his time doing these things when he can focus on these other things that are more productive. And you could think of a country the same way. The country will focus on the thing that it's relatively really, really good at. And even if it's better at the other things, it makes more sense for them to trade for those other items. Okay. And so this is like I said, this is one of the most important ideas in economics. Okay. And the reason that makes it so important is two things. It's not intuitive. So if you think about it, it doesn't quite make sense. And it's true. So it's rare in science, in social science, that you will come across a finding that is both not intuitive, so non-obvious, and also true. Oftentimes you'll hear about some new interesting finding. 9 times out of 10, it'll prove to be false, that it'll be debunked later on, or it will not hold up to scrutiny. And then most of the time when we get a new true idea, it's pretty obvious. When you think about it, you're like, okay, yeah, that's pretty obvious. Every paper I've written, every published paper I have, if I were to explain the paper to you, you'd be like, oh yeah, no duh. In fact, when I explain to my grandma or my parents, what I'm doing, they say, yeah, that's obvious. I don't know why you're wasting your life doing this. Okay, but here we have comparative advantage, which is an idea that is not intuitive and true. Remember, the idea is that even if I'm better at everything, I can still benefit from trade with somebody. Okay, so the example that is classically used is the desert island example, where, okay, say we have 2 people. There's me on the island. If I fish all day, I get 10 fish. And if I spend all day on gathering coconuts, I get 10 coconuts. If you spend all day fishing, you get 30 fish. And if you collect coconuts, you get 10 coconuts. Okay, so you're technically better at both these. We're technically the same at coconuts, but you are better. So how could we benefit from trade? Well, imagine there's no trade and I spend half my time on coconuts and fish. I get 5 and 5. You do the same thing, half your time's on coconuts and fish. You'll get 5 and 15. But if we were to specialize, if I specialize on the coconuts, you specialize on the fish, which you're relatively better at. You're much better at fishing than me. You get the 30 fish, I get the 10 coconuts. Now we have more of each good. So over here, we have a total of 10 coconuts and 20 fish. Now we have 10 coconuts and 30 fish. So we could both be better off. We can come to a trade where both of us will be better off. Okay. So, and this is the idea of comparative advantage. And everyone does this in their own life. It's like you kind of choose when you do a career, you're choosing something you think you're relatively good at. And then, you're not gonna grow your own food. You're not gonna build your own house. You're not gonna weave your own clothes. You're going to pay somebody else to do these things. So the whole entire world runs on comparative advantage, both at the individual level and at the country level. And this is kind of the fundamental idea that trade will lead to specialization, and that specialization allows us to get to a higher standard of living, everybody to get to a higher standard of living. That's the theory of comparative advantage. And we can see this, as I mentioned, throughout history. Your countries that are cut off from trade are poor. When a country closes itself down to trade, it becomes poor. All right. A real classic example of this is Rome. So Rome is like, the richest early civilization, had huge trading network. So had like this infrastructure road building enterprise where it traded via the roads, but also traded throughout the Mediterranean. And what's fun about this is how these economic historians are so ingenious with the data they get. Like, how could we measure this trade? We're talking, thousands of years ago. How could we know how much is traded? Well, one proxy, let's look at the shipwrecks. There's more trade being done. There's more ships going to and fro. There's going to be more shipwrecks. So if we carbon date the shipwreck, we can tell, when this shipwreck happened. And lo and behold, we see shipwrecks peaking during the peak of Rome, which tells us there was lots of trade via ships. And so we can actually just look at the number of shipwrecks in the Mediterranean, plot that, and that'll give us an idea of how much trade was going on. And so you can see the rise and fall of Rome in terms of their trade, as well as the political history. Okay, let's take a break before we get into the recent trade history.